Today, we're diving into an injury that is just devastating, one that can paralyze your entire arm in a split second. But we're also going to explore the absolutely incredible microsurgical techniques that are literally, and I mean literally, rewiring the human body to bring back function when all hope seems lost. So, let's get into it. Believe it or not, our story starts almost 3,000 years ago, right in the middle of the Trojan War. This line from Homer's Iliad, it's the first known description of a brachial plexus injury. Just think about it. One blow with a rock to the collarbone and a skilled warrior's arm is completely useless. It's this ancient moment of battlefield drama that just perfectly captures how sudden and catastrophic this injury really is. And for pretty much all of human history since that moment, the outcome for that warrior would have been exactly the same: a permanently paralyzed arm. But today, well, today things are completely different. We've gone from the world of ancient tragedy to modern medical marvels, where surgeons can actually restore movement by rerouting the body's own electrical wiring. So, if it's not a rock thrown on a battlefield, how does this actually happen to people today? Well, for most, the story starts with the incredible, violent forces of a high-speed accident. A classic study of over 1,000 patients found this startlingly consistent pattern, which one surgeon called the law of 70/70s. And this number right here, this is the first 70. It tells us where these injuries almost always begin. 70%. That's how many of these traumatic injuries come from traffic accidents. And the typical patient is a young guy, usually between 15 and 25 years old. But the picture gets even more specific. Right. Within that group of traffic accidents, we see the exact same number pop up again: 70% of those accidents involve motorcycles or bicycles. You can just picture it, right? A young person gets thrown from their bike, and in that one violent instant, their head and shoulder are pulled in opposite directions, stretching those nerves in their neck way past their breaking point. That is the most common way a life is changed in a flash. Okay, so our patient is now in the hospital. Their arm is paralyzed, but you can't really see what's wrong from the outside. To figure out what's broken, we need to look under the hood at the incredibly complex system that actually powers the arm. And that system is called the brachial plexus. Now, this isn't just one nerve. Oh no, it's a massive, tangled network, like a giant switchboard of electrical wiring that runs from your spinal cord, out through your shoulder, and all the way down to your fingertips. It controls everything, every single movement, every sensation. The best way to think about it is like a river system. The signal starts at the nerve roots, which come right out of the spinal cord like little springs. These streams merge into bigger trunks. Then they split and recombine to this crazy complex web. And finally, they fan out into all the individual nerve branches that go to every single muscle. So the big question for the doctors is, where along this super complicated path did the connection break? And that leads us to the single most important diagnostic question of all, one that's going to decide the entire course of treatment. Is the nerve just torn somewhere along its path, like a cut wire? Or has the nerve root been ripped completely out of the spinal cord, like a plug being violently pulled from the wall? This distinction, it is everything. On one side, you've got a rupture. That's our cut wire. The nerve is torn, sure, but its connection to the spinal cord is still there. Surgeons can, at least in theory, go in and splice those two ends back together. But an avulsion? That's way, way more serious. That's the pulled plug. The nerve root is yanked clean out of the spinal cord. There's literally nothing to reconnect it to. The power source itself is gone. So once the doctors figure out the type of injury they're dealing with, a whole new challenge starts. They are now in a race against a biological clock to get in there and fix it before the damage becomes permanent.
But here's the thing. This race is a marathon, not a sprint. The whole diagnostic process is very deliberate. It actually takes 3 to 4 weeks before the electrical tests can accurately tell you which nerves are firing and which aren't. And it can take even longer for advanced imaging to give a clear picture of whether a root has been pulled out. All of this means that the ideal window for surgery doesn't even open until about 3 to 6 months after the injury.
So that probably has you asking a pretty logical question, right? If time is so critical, why on earth do they wait? Why not just rush into surgery on day one? And here is the real kicker. The urgency isn't just about the nerve itself. It's about the muscle it's supposed to be talking to. See, after a muscle loses its nerve supply, its little docking stations for nerve signals, these things called neuromuscular end plates, they just start to wither away. And after about 18 to 24 months, they're gone for good. So even if you fix the nerve, there's nothing for it to plug into. The surgery has to happen quickly enough for the nerve to regrow all the way down to the muscle before that muscle completely forgets how to listen.
So the diagnosis is in. The clock is officially ticking. And now we get to the most amazing part of this whole story, the surgical strategies that give these patients real hope.
The whole surgical approach comes down to that initial diagnosis. If it's a rupture, the cut wire, surgeons can do what's called a nerve graft. They'll actually borrow a piece of a less important sensory nerve, usually from the patient's leg, and use it like a little extension cord to bridge the gap. But for an avulsion, the pulled plug, a graft is totally useless. So instead, they perform a nerve transfer. They find a healthy, working nerve nearby that has a less critical job, and they literally reroute it, plugging it into the nerve of the paralyzed muscle to give it a brand new power source. To really understand this, let's look at one of the most elegant and, frankly, game-changing procedures in this field. It's called the Oberlin transfer. And its goal is to bring back one of the most critical functions we need for daily life, the ability to bend your elbow. So check out how this works. The nerve that goes to the bicep is dead, but right next to it is the ulnar nerve, which controls some hand muscles, and it's working perfectly. The surgeons go in and they carefully peel off a tiny, redundant part of that healthy nerve and physically move it over, plugging it directly into the nerve that leads to the bicep. And then the truly mind-bending part happens. The brain actually rewires itself. Over months of physical therapy, the patient learns that to bend their elbow, they have to think about moving their hand. It is just a stunning biological workaround. But that surgery, as incredible as it is really just the beginning. The nerve has to slowly regrow, the brain has to totally remap itself, and the patient has to start a long, difficult journey of rehabilitation. And it's so important to be realistic about what success looks like. The goal isn't to get a perfectly normal arm back. The real goal is to restore those key functions, like being able to stabilize your shoulder, bend your elbow, and open and close your hand. The things you need to do daily tasks, like bring a fork to your mouth or carry a bag. Yeah, one of our sources really puts it clearly. A successful outcome means getting back up to 50% of the arm's function, which allows someone to regain their independence. But those really intricate fine motor skills, things like buttoning a shirt or typing, those are often lost for good. It's a story of a remarkable recovery for sure, but it's also a story of permanent change. And this all brings us to a final, really fascinating question. Everything we've talked about is basically a form of clever biological rewiring. You're using the parts you still have to work around the damage. But as science moves forward, with research into things like nerve root reimplantation or even cellular regeneration, you have to wonder, what's next? When do we stop just repairing the grid and start truly regenerating the power source itself?